through Christ. Amen. You and I have a little bit of a problem. And our problem is that our closet at home is likely to be an expression of excess. We have so many clothes. We have so much stuff that it's stuffed into our closet and likely overflowing. Today we're going to look at two people to help us with this little problem that we have. They will help us organize and declutter our closet, and they will help us organize and declutter our lives. The first person is Marie Kondo, and this is her book that Kelsey mentioned, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, the Japanese Art of Decluttering and Organizing. She also has a popular Netflix TV show. She's a phenomenon. Lots of people know about her. She's inspired a lot of people to try to tidy up. Now, here's the strategy. Here's what she does. Just briefly, she says, don't tidy up room by room. Do it by category, like starting with your clothes. Respect your belongings. Our stuff needs respect, so you engage in a conversation with your belongings, like ask your socks, do they really like to be all bundled up and tossed into a drawer? Listen for the answer. Don't get nostalgic, put blinders on, stay focused. This is about tidying up. The big thing is make a big pile of everything in one particular category. And the point is that you see how much stuff you really have when you look at it in one big lump. So you put it in a pile and you say a prayer, and one by one you ask, does this spark joy? If yes, keep it. If not, be thankful for it. Then you get to decide where to put things. Only the things that spark joy, not the other things. And Marie Kondo has a very special way of folding things, taking care of things. Here's the process. This is how you fold a shirt. And then when you're done folding your shirts, this is what it looks like in your drawer. Don't hang the shirts up in the closet. Put them in a drawer. And then you go to your socks, and this is what your socks look like. And so after you've done your shirts and your socks, this is what your closet looks like. And once you're at this point, fall in love with your closet. You fall in love with your organization and your decluttering. You breathe easier, perhaps feel a sense of satisfaction and joy. I haven't actually done it yet. Sounds a little offbeat to me, but I really like the end result. Because decluttering can change us. This is something that can make a difference in how we feel and how we go about our daily life. Interestingly, Jesus makes the very same point about decluttering in a parable that he tells. I'm going to set this up by going a few verses before what was read in the Gospel of Luke, because how Jesus sets up this parable is really interesting. There's a crowd following Jesus. He's the point in his ministry where people are starting to pay attention and wondering who he is and why is he saying all these things. Someone out of the crowd, we don't know who they are, don't know their name, steps up and approaches Jesus and says this, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Apparently, the father of this guy, and he has a brother, the father has died without a will. The estate is held by the two brothers, and according to the law at the time, the inheritance cannot be divided unless the older brother agrees. This is obviously the younger brother. The older brother doesn't want to divide the inheritance. So the younger brother is trying to pull Jesus into this conflict and demand that the older brother be told that you're out of line, divide the inheritance. The younger brother's demand shows us that the split has already taken place between these two brothers. There's already a conflict. And there's hardly anything uglier than a family arguing about an inheritance. Jesus responds to this demand by flat out refusing to be the referee in a family feud. When people are having conflict, they often seek out a third party, one of them does, to take their side and then go communicate this to the other person. You go tell so-and-so that I'm right. This is called triangularization, where one person tries to get another person to arm against two against one against this person. It happens a lot. You know this if you're the parent of more than one child. Jesus does not get drawn into conflict because Jesus wants to bring people together and not take sides and not finalize separations. Jesus' prime concern is to heal relationships between people, not decide who's right and who's wrong, because it's in the healing that it's possible for both parties to deal with the issues, not by taking sides. So Jesus warns the younger brother about what's really in his demand. And he says it's about greed and it's about possessions. So Jesus then tells this parable to illustrate that point about wants and desires and having too much stuff. This parable is about a financially secure man who has property. This is a painting of the whole parable. The financially secure man is right there. He's got all this stuff and he's lording it over all the people working for him in his fields and other people. It's interesting that Jesus talks about a financially secure person. Apparently, not everyone who was in that crowd following Jesus was a poor person or peasant. There were also people who were merchants, some financially secure. In this parable, the financially secure man, his property, his land has produced an abundant harvest. Now, here's what Jesus says. And he thought to himself, what should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. He knows he's having a good year. He knows he's going to have too much. Where am I going to put all this that has come from my land? Now, it's important to catch that Jesus is telling us that this is an interior monologue. The conversation is taking place within the financially secure man's head. He's talking to himself. Kenneth Bailey, New Testament scholar who lived in the Middle East his whole career, writes that this is a very sad scene. Village people in the Middle East make decisions after long discussions with friends. Families, communities, villages are all held tightly together, but this man appears to have no family and no friends. He can only have a dialogue with himself. And he thought to himself, Jesus tells us. This does not connote wise circumspection. but self-centered plotting. He comes to a decision. I will do this, he says to himself. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. No mention of the benevolence of God. No mention of possibly investing this excess for the good of the community. No mention of sharing with those who are less fortunate. What's this internal monologue all about? It's all about himself. I will do this. I will pull down. I will store. I will say, my crops, my barns, my grain, my goods, my soul. This is what happens when you're talking only to yourself. It can be an entirely self-indulgent conversation. You and I live in the context of American consumerism, and the rampant consumerism of our day encourages us to such self-indulgent internal conversations. We have been shaped to see ourselves primarily as consumers. We shop, we buy, we overindulge, not because we're in such great need, but because American consumer culture encourages us to focus on our wants, on our desires, with the underlying assumption being this: if I can just get what I want, if I can just get what I desire, I will feel complete. I will feel whole. And we're always in that quest for that thing, or that relationship, or that job, or that experience, or that cruise that will make us feel like we're getting what we want or what we desire. But here's the problem. Our wants are endless. Our desires are unsatiable. So it puts us in the routine. We get what we want, but it's not enough. We get what we desire, but it's not enough. And we're restless. What do we do when we don't know what to do? Let's go shopping. This is where God enters the conversation. And the conversation is not comforting. God calls the man in the parable a fool. This is the one place in Luke's gospel where God actually speaks in a parable. Actual words of God, you fool. Suddenly, this man realizes that being financially secure doesn't make one secure in his regular life. Because God tells him, not only are you a fool, but now it's all over for you. He's a fool because he tried to secure himself and his future without reference to God. He's a fool because He had to learn the hard way that his soul, his self, his very life is not his own, but it's on loan from God. He is a fool because he's not going to have the opportunity to enjoy what he spent his whole life accumulating, and now plans to put into larger barns. And you could just substitute the word closet for barn, or garage, or basement, or storage rental place. Well, Jesus concludes, "So it is with those who store up treasure for themselves, but are not rich toward God." This financially secure man would be the envy of most people. He is so wealthy, he does not have enough room to store all that he has and all his possessions, but he's a fool because in the midst of his good fortune, he doesn't have the sense to know what is really important. Most of what we have is just the product of American consumer culture. Most of what we have really isn't that important, is it? In fact, a lot of it just gets in the way. Our stuff gets in the way of our priorities. Our stuff gets in the way of our finances. Our stuff gets in the way of our time because we have to think about where we're going to put it and how we're going to store it and why do we really need it. And most of the stuff just gets in the way of our faith because the problem is our possessions get to the point where they possess us. Marie Kondo may be a little offbeat, but she helps us get a handle on our stuff. And then Jesus comes along and encourages us to declutter our lives, to get rid of the values and the attitudes and the perspectives that simply reflect American consumer capitalism and don't have much to do with Christian faith and following Jesus Christ. Jesus wants us to be rich toward God. We are rich toward God when we step out of American consumerism as the controlling factor of our lives. We are rich toward God when we begin to grasp that God is rich, exceedingly rich towards us, and through Christ, God gives us all that we need to live full, purposeful, and abundant lives. We are rich toward God when we do not live to appease our inordinate self-concern, but when we see that real joy isn't just keeping a nice thing around. Real joy comes in giving, in sharing what God has given us. So, how full is your closet? When you go home today, take a good, honest look. What does your closet say about your priorities, your finances, and how busy you are? What does your closet say about storing up treasure for yourself or being rich toward God? Our God is an unhurried God who encourages us to declutter our lives in order to make room for what is really important.